Hi guys, I know I said I wasn't going to do chapter 5 today, but I'm going to see how far I can make it before I have to get ready for the wedding. So welcome to Christy's Book Corner, today, and I'm your host Christy Mason. Today is chapter 5 of Finding Jacob Wetterling by Robert M. Dudley. And the chapter we're going to do today is The Search Begins. And I might have to take a little break, probably like 10 pages in to take a sip of my water. Okay, so let's see. The search begins. It doesn't pay for us to get away out in the middle of the places if you can't get out there with a vehicle. This guy was in a vehicle, no doubt about that, so we're concentrating on roads and ditches. David Rodell, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Al Garber, FBI supervisor of the St. Paul Office Violence Crimes Unit, was relaxing at his home in front of his television on Sunday night, October 22nd, 1989. The telephone rang shortly before 10 p.m. On the other end was St. Cloud-based FBI agent Al Cataldo. Cataldo informed Garber of Jacob Wetterling's abduction and the general circumstances surrounding the crime. He immediately phoned his boss, Jeff Jamar, and suggested that Garber drive over to St. Joseph the first thing Monday morning if Jacob had not been found before then. Jamar gave his approval. When Garber checked in with the local FBI office in St. Cloud early Monday morning, he learned there had been no sign of Jacob or his abductor. He left home and headed northwest for the 90-minute drive to St. Joseph. Garber was somewhat surprised by Jamar's willingness to agree to his plan. Throughout Jamar's tenure as his boss, he had been insistent about relegating him to office duty. Garber preferred a hands-on approach, having worked his way up to supervisor through several investigative assignments over his FBI career. He preferred to be right there in the field, working alongside his agents. Garber arrived in St. Joseph at 9 a.m. on Monday, October 23rd. He went directly to the command post that had been set up at the Delwyn Ballroom, just a few blocks from where Jacob had been abducted. There he met the agent Cataldo, Stearns County Sheriff Charlie Gaft, and St. Joseph Police Chief Bill Loretz. They briefed Garber on the known details of the abduction and summarized the search options that had been initiated immediately following the abduction the night before. Graft recounted the efforts of his deputy staff. He had called in a state patrol helicopter to search the area. He had personally boarded the chopper for the air search that began at about 10:30 p.m. The actual time of the helicopter... Oh, I'm not reading all that. By midnight, the helicopter was searching a residential area to the half-mile north of the abduction site. The chopper's searchlight scanned back and forth several times across the area surrounding the crime scene, soaring the woods and open fields for any sight of Jacob. At one point, the chopper was observing the ground so closely and it almost came into contact with utility wires near the scene. A total of 35 deputies and police officers searched Wellington that first night, ultimately suspending the search at 3 a.m. By Monday, there were 4 helicopters. At least 6 trained canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing everyone in the area, and the door-to-door search for information that could help locate Jacob. Minnesota Department of Natural Resources officers used ATVs to search the area as well. Teams of law enforcement officials and volunteers covered a 25 square mile area around the abduction site. Despite their efforts, no sign of Jacob or his abductor were discovered. Jeff Jamar, chief of the FBI office in St. Paul, arrived in St. Joseph later in the day and drove over to the Wetterling home to meet Jerry, Patty, and Patty Wetterling. They discussed the steps investigators had taken at that point and what they were planning to do next. Investigators scrutinized the Wetterlings as potential suspects. Well, that's usually the case in a missing person. They were taken to the Comfort Inn Hotel and interviewed for 5 hours, sometimes together, sometimes in separate rooms. Questioning covered a wide range of personal and business-related areas, including their days of dating at Mankato State University and student teaching in Mexico. Jerry, in particular, was thoroughly vetted. He submitted to a lie detector test, but the results showed no indication of deception. The Wetterlings were quickly ruled out as suspects. They were transparent and cooperative, and clearly had nothing to hide. Jerry was president of the local chapter of the National Association for Advancement of Colored People. He acknowledged it was possible that his involvement with the regulation could be a factor in his son's abduction, but said he had no reason to believe that was the case. He had no enemies or quarrels of any kind with anyone he could think of. No one had ever threatened him or his family in any way. He was at a loss to explain how or why anyone would have ill will toward him or his family. I don't think it was anyone targeting our family, Jerry said. He didn't ask the kids' names or only ages. The area and ground searches were halted on Monday night, about 24 hours after the abduction. Authorities had searched in vain for any signs of Jacob or his abductor. We've got over the area 15 times, Graff told reporters. Despite the massive search, few tangible clues were found. Leads came in from the public, but after a full day had passed, there had been no communication of any kind from the kidnapper. Investigators concluded the abductor had probably left the area with Jacob. Graff speculated that the kidnapper might have stalked Jacob for several days before abducting him, and that the publicity surrounding the case may have driven the kidnapper out of the area. He noted that no ransom demands had been made, and some said authorities believed the kidnapper was a local sex offender. It was someone who knew the area very well, Graff said. A person had to have stalked them quite a while to do this. We think it's a sex offender, no doubt about it. I'm not an expert on pedophiles, FBI agent Jeff Jamar offered, but that's one indication to me that this person is a pedophile. There is no question. The child was adopted for a specific purpose. Jamar and Graff closed their words carefully. Choose the words carefully. They were referring to the kidnapper's actions. He had a group that generators of Aaron Larson and Jacob Wetterling as part of his selection process. Stearns County Deputy Sheriff Jim Costa Riba enforced Gaff's assignment. It's difficult to say that someone just happened to be in the area at the time. Coast was set. It's a fairly remote area and still no, no, and it's not traveled by everybody. You've had to say the person followed the three boys from somewhere. Gaft announced that several recently released inmates from the St. Cloud Reformatory had been investigated, but no evidence was found connecting any of them to the kidnapping. One former inmate, a convicted sex offender, was surveilled by investigators, but an inspection of his car revealed that his tire could not have left the tracks in the Razor driveway. The disclosure about the tire treads was the first hint that investigators had been able to secure physical evidence from the crime scene. Investigators received more than 300 telephone tips in the first couple of days and developed more than 100 potential suspects. From tips, interviews, and parole records, several potential suspects were convicted sex offenders. There's the abduction site. And then this is a map of, so there's the Wetterling home. There's the abduction site. And then here's where they were going, Tom Thumb. Let's see. Jacob Wetterling was kidnapped near a mailbox at the end of the driveway to the farm owned by Robert and Rita Rasin. The Rasins was the residence on the right-hand side of the road as boys were biking north to Tom Thumb. Dan Razor, 34, lived in the house at the other end of that long gravel driveway. He lived there with his parents, but they were on vacation in Europe at the time of the abduction. Razor was home alone the night of the 22nd. He told investigators and the media he had seen a vehicle quickly turn around in his driveway around the time of the abduction. He also told them about an unusual car he had seen in his driveway earlier that day. Sometime in the middle of the afternoon, Razor heard something going on outside as he was in his second-floor bedroom, organizing his records collection. He got up from his desk to investigate and saw a tan-colored car speeding down the driveway in a cloud of dust. The car made a fast 180 degrees left-hand turn around near the farm buildings, then sped back up the driveway, turned toward 91st Avenue. He described the car as similar to a 1970s Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Razor said he had never seen anything like that on his family farm before. The man behind the wheel of the car was driving like life depended on it. After the car left, Razor returned to his record collection. In the late afternoon, he took a break from the records and went for a short run. It was unseasonably warm that Sunday. He ran across the field on the farm, along a path that led to the Delwyn Ballroom, a field on the farm. Along a path that led... Oh, I just read that! Oops. Where a polka festival was going on. From there, he headed west to 91st, then back south toward home. It was early evening by the time he returned from his run. He remembered that he picked up the Sunday's newspaper by the mailbox and then continued up the long driveway. He showered, made himself some dinner, and went back to his desk. Razor said his dog, Smokey, started barking at some point after dark. Hearing a car coming up the driveway, Razor got up from his desk, turned off the light, and went over to the second-floor bedroom window to look outside. He wondered if it was the same car he had seen earlier. As it came closer, he realized it was a different car. It was moving pretty quickly, but not as fast as the car that had come through in the afternoon. This car was made the same left-hand 180-degree turn. From the vantage point of the window, Razor said he thought he could see a woman or a boy in his passenger seat. He or she appeared to have their hands covered their eyes. After turning around, the car sped back down the driveway just like the other car. Razor described the vehicle as a small dark car, probably blue with headlights close together. Shortly after seeing the car, Razor said he finished with his record collection and went to bed and fell asleep. He was awakened some time later by the sound of Smokey barking again. Razor went to the window and saw people with flashlights by the firewood pile, just up the driveway from his house. Thinking they might be stealing firewood, he went to investigate. He turned off the lights inside the house so he would not be seen and went outside. He saw there were several men with flashlights by the wood pile. Razor went back into the house and called 911. The time of the call was at 11:23 p.m. The 911 operator informed him that a child had been abducted and that the people with flashlights were police officers searching for the boy. After completing the call, Razor grabbed a flashlight and went outside to see if he could help. He spoke with Stearns County Sheriff's Deputy Bruce Batchhold. Razor offered to search the farm's buildings and proceed to check each of the buildings. Afterward, he said he figured there wasn't much more he could do, and since he had to work the next day, he went back to bed. The next morning, Razor left for work and started to drive his car down the driveway, but was unable to cross the crime scene tape investigator had hung across the driveway. Razor said he got out of the car, crossed the tape, and jogged down the driveway to ask the officers how he could get out. He said they became upset with him and directed him to drive through the hollow grass swallow along the driveway. Despite having his second contact with officers in his driveway that morning, Razor said no one questioned him until Monday morning at his teaching job at Rickory School in Cold Springs. A pair of investigators pulled him out of his classroom for a search of his car and an interview that lasted about 45 minutes. They did not search Razor's office or band room. According to Razor, he first told investigators about the two cars he witnessed. Then they interviewed him at school. He said the interview was when he first learned that Jacob Wetterling had been abducted at the end of his driveway, and that he had no idea the kidnapping had taken place so near his family's property. Razor said it occurred to him then, for the first time, that the car he witnessed Sunday evening was probably related to the kidnapping. On Monday, a bloodhound tracked Jacob's scent from the road up the Razor's unpaved driveway for about 75 yards to the place where Jacob's last footprints were found in the dirt, with the first set of car's tire tracks alongside. Detective interpreted the footprints as evidence of residence by Jacob. A Nike shoe, similar in style and size to the shoes he was wearing, was used to help identify the prints as Jacob's. The bloodhound did not indicate Jacob's scent beyond that point. Detective Steve Mund of the Stearns County Sheriff's Office made plaster casts of several footprints and tire tracks found in the driveway. Don Behan, a canine officer from the Minneapolis Police Department, worked his dog. Emma was tracking Jacob's last footprints. Behan noted that the dog's strong reaction to Jacob's scent was a critical part of the early investigation. A personal belonging of Jacob's was used to train almost to the scent. It was a real strong track, and then all of a sudden the track ended. Banham said, "I believe that the dog was indicating correctly. It told me that Jacob was at that point and turned around and went the other way. either in a vehicle or back on foot. Investigators took cast of tire tracks near the scene, but did not communicate a high level of certainty that the tracks were those of the kidnapper. Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Director Mark Shields said he was not confident that the kidnapper made the tracks. Nothing there were considered as possible evidence at that point. Within days, the number of law enforcement officers involved in Jacob's search had gone to more than 50. It quickly became clear that the Delwell Wind Ballroom could no longer house the growing base of operations. The officer was relocated to the basement of the Law Enforcement Center in downtown St. Cloud. Investigators sent photos of Jacob to law enforcement agencies with a 5-state area. Captain Jack Gertz of the CSCO created a computerized file for logging information that came in from tips and investigators. As leads were generated, they were sorted into A and B groups. A leads were critical information to be investigated immediately. The B leads to be investigated soon. Steve Mound and Lau Leyland of the CSCO and Frank Whippler, that's a funny word, from the Benton County Sheriff's Office sorted the leads. Leyland was the lead detective for Stearns County and was considered an expert in the psychological evaluation of suspects. He had been on a hunting vacation out west when Jacob was kidnapped, but flew back when he was informed of the abduction. According to all fellow investigators, Leyland was upset about being relegated to sorting his leads in the basement. Would have been more useful in the field, utilizing his skills for interrogating suspects. As tips poured in from concerned citizens, investigators zeroed in on a small red car that had been seen in St. Joseph over the course of the past 3 weeks. The car was reported seen on 91st Avenue on the night of the abduction. A similar car was also reported seen multiple times parked at the Del Wind Ballroom, just a couple blocks away from the Tom Thumb, where the boys had rented the video. The driver was described as a Caucasian male, 25 to 30 years old, and weighing 185 to 990 pounds. Authorities identified as many as 24 red cars to investigate, and possible connection to the promising lead. An abandoned red car was reported seen parked near the south end of Lake Owasso in Ramsey County. A tip around the 1987 Mercury car came into a Twin Cities television station from a caller that said they thought that a body had been recovered from the car and tossed into the lake. According to BCA Director Mark Shields, investigators searched the area around the lake on Wednesday, October 25, 1989, on foot and by helicopter. The car was located but quickly rolled out because its tire tracks did not match those at the abduction scene. Investigators decided not to drag the lake. Investigators ultimately ruled out the suspect's red car that had been seen in St. Joseph's. An art school student from St. Cloud State heard that authorities were looking for a small red car and came forward to explain that he owned a red car and had been in the area multiple times in recent weeks looking for scenes to sketch. Investigators did not consider him a suspect. Police in La Crosse, Wisconsin, investigated a report that a man fitting the description of Jacob's kidnapper was seen by an employee of the Quillen's IGA store. He said the man acted nervously nervous and asked for change for calls he made from a payphone. The man was driving the tan-colored Chevrolet Citation. The license plates were checked and found to belong to a man from Mackinac, Illinois. Authorities said that's in Illinois? Oh, no, it's not. It's in Michigan. They have Jacob's abduction, but were able. Oh, sorry. Authorities said they had identified 4 suspects within a couple of days of Jacob's abduction, but were able to clear them, confirming their alibis. 3 of the men had criminal records for sex offense and had been released from correctional facilities or treatment programs in recent months. By Wednesday, October 25th, authorities were investigating the likelihood that Jacob's abduction was related to the January 13th, 1989 abduction and sexual assault of a 12-year-old Cold Springs boy named Jared. Jared was walking home alone from downtown Cold Springs at about 9:45 p.m. on a Friday night when a man in a car approached him and asked for directions to a local residence. As Jared started giving directions, the man got out of the car and grabbed him by the shoulders, forcing him into the car. The man then drove a few miles to a rural area just north of Richmond, where he sexually assaulted Jared. The result released him on the way back to Cold Springs, near County Road 158 on Highway 23, at about 11 p.m. Jared described the car used by his abductor as dark blue in color, a late model, mid-sized 4-door with blue interior, and a large rack on the trunk. The abductor was described as a white male in his mid-30s to early 40s in age, approximately 5'8", tall, 107 pounds, with a small gut, broad shoulders, rough dark skin, large ears, large nose, and dark hair. The man was wearing black boots, a gray vest, a brown baseball cap, and a camouflage shirt and pants, similar to military-issue type clothing. He seemed to know the area around Cold Spring and Richmond quite well, although the information was not disclosed publicly at the time. The key to investigators linking Jacob and Jared's case was that the abductor had groped the boys over their clothing, as Wetterling's task force investigators would later learn. It was a common element in other unsolved sexual assaults that had occurred in the neighboring communities of Painesville a few years earlier. The SCSO conducted the investigation into Jared's abduction and assault, with Detective Lou Leyland and Doug Pierce leading the way. Within 3 days of Jared's abduction, Stearns County Sheriff Deputy Robert Ziegler received information about possible suspects in the kidnapping. Danny James Heinrich of nearby Painesville. Heinrich drove a 1987 dark blue 4-door Mercury Topaz. Other descriptive details of the car remarkably consist with the vehicle Jared had described. Zimmer learned that Heinrich was in the military, either the National Guard or Army Reserves, and that he was known to frequently wear military fatigues. Heinrich's physical description at the time was that he was 5'5" tall, weighed 160 pounds, and had brown eyes and brown-colored hair. On January 17, 1989, Pierce gathered 6 photographs of various men whose description and characteristics were similar to what Jared had described, including a current photo of Heinrich. Jared viewed the photo and identified Heinrich and one of the men as resembling his abductor. Jenny. Danny Heinrich was employed at Master Mark Industries at the time of Jared's abduction and assault. On January 18, 1989, 5 days after the incident, Detective Pierce and Leyland drove to Master Mark to look at Heinrich's vehicle, a 1987 Mercury Topaz. They matched the license plate number with motor vehicle records to confirm that it belonged to Heinrich. They noted that the interior was gray colored and there was no luggage rack. The only details that differ significantly from Jared's description. There is no record to indicate that Pierce or Leyland interviewed Danny Heinrich about Jared's January 1989 abduction as a part of their investigation in his case. In February 1989, the Tri-County Crime Stoppers offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of Jared's abductor. The reward was published in the Cold Springs Record and Painesville Press and the St. Cloud Times, with a police artist sketch of the assailant and detailed description of him in the car. Near the end of October 1989, within a week of Jacob's kidnapping, authorities released information about kidnapping attempts that had occurred in the township of St. Joseph in July, along with a sketch of an assailant. Nine-year-old Andrew had narrowly escaped being abducted by a man in a van, pulled up alongside him, and asked him his age. When the man tried to get him inside the van, Andrew was able to run away. The would-be kidnapper was described as a white male in his late 20s, with dark brown hair, dark eyes, a slender build, and fair complexion with a mole on his forehead. He was driving an older, light tan van with white trim and rust along the bottom edges. Andrew's mother said that at the time no one would believe them, but they told them of the incident. The CSCO didn't even inform the St. Joseph Police Department about the report until after Jacob was abducted 3 months later. Andrew's mother indicated that after Jacob was taken, there was speculations locally that the kidnapping was for ransom. Andrew's father was a doctor, and Jacob's father was a chiropractor. Many people authorized that the abductor was selecting children whose parents would have money. That's the picture of Heinrich. Investigators explored the connection between the two cases. They felt the use of the gun in Jacob's abduction might have resulted from a prior failed attempt, because the man used a gun, which is a very high risk thing to do. We've concluded that he may have tried to failed before. FBI agent Jeff Jamer explained, "The key aspect of this guy is he did ask the boy his age." FBI spokesman Byron Gildler said, adding that Andrew's assailant was a strong potential suspect in the Wetterling case. And an unusual coincidence, the day of Jacob's abduction, October 22nd, happened to be Andrew's 10th birthday. Following Jacob's abduction, the FBI questioned Andrew's neighbors and found several witnesses who had seen the suspect's van in the neighborhood prior to the kidnapping attempt. The sketch of the assailant, as well as information about him, promptly generated more than 1,500 phone calls to search headquarters. Despite a considerable number of leads and witness statements, the man's identity was never determined. Additionally, details about Andrew's new abduction and the man driving the van came to light a few weeks after Jacob was taken. 3 different families in St. Joseph Township area, including 2 that lived near Andrew's home, came forward to relate incidents they had witnessed. One 11-year-old boy said that a man in a similar van took his picture and then drove off. It happened about 2 weeks after Andrew's abduction attempt. The boy said he had been fishing from a dock on a lake when he saw a van stopped close by. The driver leaned out the window and took his picture. I turned around and looked at him, and he backed up. Turned and got the heck out of there, the boy said. He described the man as having black hair and said he was holding eyeglasses in his hand while he took the picture. The boy said he had been scared to tell anyone about the incident because he was afraid something might happen to him if word got out. The FBI obtained this information while questioning boys in the school's district. Another young boy from Andrew's neighborhood told his parents he saw a van matching the description on the same day of abduction attempt, although he noted nothing unusual about the site. The mother of another St. Joseph family reported seeing a similar van almost every day for 3 months, June through August of 1989, in an area about 7 miles from Andrew's neighborhood. Her family was building a new home, and the van had been parked across the street whenever she arrived there at about 6 p.m. and would remain there until about 9 p.m. She never got a good look at the driver, so she thought it was unusual, but had not felt compelled to call the police until authorities released a sketch of the van in November. He wasn't on our land, and he didn't do anything, she said, but I would always say, "Oh, there's that van again." I would watch him, and he would just sit there. He wouldn't move. He used to think he was hunting, because that's how long he sat. It occurred to her, after hearing news of Andrew's abduction, that the man may have been watching the group of kids that were always playing outside with her own 4 children. After his house was completed and children were no longer playing outside, the van wasn't seen there again. John Douglas, the FBI's legendary profile, was brought into the investigation in the headquarters in Quantico, Virginia, to create a psychological and physical profile of Jacob's abductor. Search profiles had proven to be accurate in about 90% of cases in Jacob's case. Douglas concluded that the prospector was white male, probably about 25 to 35 years old, employed in a law-skilled job, and had little contact with the public. He thought the man might have acne, facial scars, or some other physical deformality. Some aspects of Jacob Wetterling's kidnapping were unusual. The assailant wore a mask and used a gun. He had been particularly brazen in committing the crime in front of witnesses, and then later them leave. Douglas suggested he had a recent high-stress event in his life that triggered high-risk behavior. The use of the gun indicated he may have attempted a similar crime, but failed. He accidentally would probably have noticed a high latent level of anxiety in him in the days after the kidnapping. John Douglas wrote several books about the case he worked during his storied FBI career. He advised investigators to keep tabs on main suspects, especially near the first anniversary of the crime. A violent criminal, he wrote, almost always visits the victim's grave near anniversary days, especially around the first anniversary. He explained that violent criminals who committed murder after bury their victims' bodies in a location that is similar to the criminal, somewhere he felt comfortable. The FBI profile was released in hopes that someone would recognize the suspect. Chief Jeff Jamar acknowledged, however, that investigators had not yet developed a strong theory of what had happened to Jacob. Wetterling Task Force investigators actively sought tips from the general public. They wanted to know if anyone saw anything out of the ordinary or any unusual people prior to Jacob's kidnapping. St. Joseph resident Cindy Levold remembered seeing a man in Cash West Food Mart several times. She called to the task force with a description of the man dressed in a military fatigues. She said he stood out to her as being unusual because he looked creepy. On Thursday, October 26th, a group of 30 volunteers from several surrounding counties came to St. Joseph with horses to search the area around the abduction site once again. The horseback search began about a mile east of St. Joseph, then crossed through the Silk River and headed westward, St. Joseph and beyond. The search party was looking for any sign of Jacob on an article of his clothing that may have been left behind or snagged up a branch. No evidence was found. The use of horses offered several advantages over searching on foot. Settling a high elevation, a searcher can cover more ground on horseback and get into areas of rough terrain that could be difficult to traverse on foot. Riders are able to pick up a clue from horses which have a keen sense of sight and smell. You learn to read your horses, and Captain Byron Hagan, a member of Dakota County Sheriff's Mounted Patrol. You watched his ears, and if they come up and the horses start looking around, you follow where they looking. By the end of October, there were 70 law enforcement officers. Okay, we're almost halfway done. You cannot get out of there with a vehicle, he said. This guy was in a vehicle, no doubt about that, so we're concentrating on roads and ditches. If you can't get there with a car, you can't get there. We hope that the angle has been using. Law enforcement authorities set up roadblocks in St. Joseph's on Sunday, October 29th, 1 week after the kidnapping. Passing motorists were questioning during traffic stops that began at 7:30 p.m. and continued through 10. Authorities hope to find any delivery trucks, hunters, or others who might normally drive through the area on Sunday nights. More than 2,000 vehicles were stopped and about 40 people were questioned at length, but no meaningful clues were produced. One of the investigators' best leads to date developed on Monday, October 30th, after a witness reported seeing a man and a boy matching Jacob's description stop along a road near the city of Hector. The man was driving a white light model General Motors vehicle. The man appeared to be in his late 20s and stood about 6'1". According to the witness, he may have had a gun. He had a dark complexion and was wearing gold or silver glasses, a brown or tan cape, and a light gray jacket with white lettering on the sleeves. The witness agreed to be hypnotized to glean as many details as possible from him. He told investigators that the boy he saw with the man appeared to be urinating alongside the road. He described the boy as having brown hair, wearing a red jacket with blue letters, and a pair of blue sweatpants. Clothing generally matching the description of what Jacob was wearing that night when last seen. The witness said the boy got back in the car with the man and they sped off as he approached them. The driver ran a stop sign and headed eastward on Highway 212. About an hour later, a sheriff deputy spotted a similar car eastbound near Victoria. He followed it to Eden Prairie and stopped the driver. The 34-year-old man was arrested for possession of 2 loaded handguns without a permit. He was driving a 1978 while Chevrolet Malibu and was alone in the car. Investigators assembled a lineup, but the Hector witness was unable to identify the driver as the man he had been seen earlier that day. Investigators lost confidence in the lead a few days later, after the witness became less concerned of what he had seen. Within 10 days of Jacob's abduction, investigators had compiled a list of hundreds of possible suspects. More than 100 had already been eliminated. Most were local men with histories of child sexual abuse. We feel, based on crime scenes analysis, that the abductor was from this area. An FBI spokesman, Byron Gidler infused the profiling research by our behavioral science unit all leads us to the strong option that the individual was familiar with this area, that he had worked here at one time and still has friends and associates here. He knew his way around. And an unusual development: an inmate at the state prison in Stillwater, Minnesota, told a few prisoners that he had kidnapped Jacob. The prisoner shared his information with the FBI, and Carmen Petrosillo, an agent from Garber's unit, promptly went into the prison to uncover it. The suspect told Piccirillo that he wanted to pay to have his car destroyed. The car was located and torn apart by FBI lab technicians, but no evidence was found. The suspect's rural farmhouse was searched but again, nothing. Garber and Minnesota BCA agent Dennis Sigfos attempted to interview the suspect, but he was uncooperative. Ground searches of the area were called off about 2 weeks after Jacob's abduction. In all, more than 300 square miles of fields, rivers, woods, farms, and homes had been searched. Much of the area had been searched multiple times, but no real clues have been discovered from the efforts. With tips from the public being too slow, somewhat authorities released a sketch of the van used in the attempted abduction of Andrew that summer. Additional details about the van were released. It was a 1970s model with a white bumper and a cracked blue-colored bag deflector in front. It was a utility-type vehicle with black wall truck tires, 2 rear windows and handles on the back. Doors on the back doors. Sheriff Charlie Gaft noted that the investigators quickly became busy with up to 200 callers, many giving similar descriptions of what they had seen. The investigation soon became focused on finding a man who was seen actively suspicious at Tom Thumb store just before Jacob was abducted. He was seen standing outside the convenience store at about 8:45 to 9 p.m. Just minutes before the abduction, a father and his 4-year-old daughter went to the store and noticed a man standing by the door staring at them. The store clerk reported seeing the man standing by the store's ice machines. When she had emptied the trash bins at 9 p.m., she later told investigators that Jacob, Trevor, and Aaron came into the store minutes later and gave no identification that they had seen the strange man. On November 6, 1989, the FBI released a sketch of a man, described as a white male in his 50s, about 6 feet tall, having a large build and weighing about 200 pounds. Witness described him as having white hair and a receding hairline. FBI spokesman Brian Gilder told the media that his man was not a main suspect, but they had a sense of urgency in identifying him. We have been working diligently from the day one to locate him, Gilder said. We're appealing to the public to contact us if they feel they know this man. It was believed that the same man had been seen that same day at about 3:45 p.m. outside a Quill Mart convenience store in nearby Avon. A married couple and their 2 daughters reported seeing a man with a piercing stare as he leered at customers. He did not speak or make any purchases. His odd behavior was noted by other customers. One family was so upset by his presence that they left the Avon store without making a purchase. On Sunday, November 5th, exactly 2 weeks after Jacob's abduction, a woman working at the Tom Thumb reported that a man came into the store about 9 p.m. and started talking and laughing about Jacob's abduction. They'll never find that boy, he reportedly said. A police sketch of the man was similar to the one made of the man with the piercing stare seen at the store that night of Jacob's abduction. He was described as being 6 feet tall, weighing 200 pounds, bald with gray hair. He drove away in the dark-colored car. On November 6, 1989, a young girl in Minot, North Dakota, reported she had seen a young boy matching Jacob's description of the suspicious-looking man. She told authorities she was looking at a poster of Jacob at the local shopping center when the boy walked up and asked for her help. He was wearing a red hockey jacket with patches on the front and hockey logo on the back. The man then yelled for the boy to come back. He was wearing a long coat, and she indicated that he gave him the impression that he had a weapon hidden underneath. The girl's mother reported seeing a tan van matching the description of the van involved in Andrew's kidnapping attempt. The FBI interviewed the girl and her mother. According to the Minot police, Lieutenant Armin Lennick. However, the girl quickly changed details of her statement, and other people at the mall were unable to corroborate her original story. The lead was dismissed. By the end of the first week of November, investigators had received more than 12,000 tips from the public. What was missing, though, was one call that would lead authorities to Jacob and his kidnapper. Patty Wetterling made a public plea for people to come forward with information, stating her belief that someone in the area knew of something and that they should come forward. While tips generated from media coverage and sketches of the suspect that had so far failed to produce any arrest, the publicity did help solve a pair of cases in Shreveport, Louisiana. A 10-year-old boy, Bozo City boy, had been assaulted, and an 11-year-old girl from Shreveport had been raped. Later then, when a 10-year-old Amy Mojovic of Bay Village, Ohio, vanished from a local shopping mall. Callers who have seen the sketch of the suspect in the Wetterling's case open to James Edward Belska. Belska was arrested and charged in the assaults of the Bozo City boy and Shreveport girl, but apparently was not involved in the kidnapping. Mojovic kidnapping. He had been released from prison in June 1989 after receiving 9 years of assault for assaulting 2 children in the late 1970s. Investigators determined that the Boschka was not involved in Jacob's abduction. The attention to other abductions across the country highlighted the fact that authorities were sketched and then uncovering a tremendous array of leads and information. From Texas to Nevada and places in between, reported sightings of Jacob kept investigators scrambling. A site in Joplin, Missouri, and a pair in Rapids River and Marquette in Michigan, Upper Peninsula, turning up nothing. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for watching. This was part 2. Stay tuned for part part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. And remember to dare to dream.